Welcome to the Our State Book Club podcast. I'm your host, New York Times bestselling author and North Carolina native Wiley Cash. In today's bonus episode, we sit down with author Bob Crawford, who happens to be a founding member and the upright bass player for the Avett Brothers. We are here with Bob Crawford of the Avett Brothers in his beautiful home outside of Durham, North Carolina. And you have a new book coming out.
Wiley, you said Bob has a new book. Well, Bob has a first book and an only book, and it is this book. And it's like I've been doing the music thing for over 20 years. And there are similarities, like the publishing world and the music. There's differences and there's similarities. And the idea of like pre-sales and getting the word out and on all of that in publishing is just as important as
Absolutely.
music. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Really, the book covers the 1820s through 1848. And I found that to be, like you said, as I studied the life of John Quincy Adams and the times in which he lived, I found so many, people say history doesn't repeat. Some people attribute to Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And my sense was there are so many differences, in the time periods, but there are these bells that ring.
Sure.
Maybe, all the historical elements, it does change over time and this and that, and technologies change, but people don't change.
Sure.
The human heart has not changed.
And people are very complicated. And I think John Quincy Adams is this kind of historical character. I think when we look back at history and we have these kind of lions of history, whether it be Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass, we want to be able to slot them and say, that person is one thing. That person stood for this big, grand, thematic American ideal. But you look at the life of John Quincy Adams, he's a very, very complicated person. When you're researching, I'm sure it was like a bead of mercury. You had a hard time pinning him down on a lot of issues.
Yeah, you can't pin him down. It is hard to pin him down. The great thing about John Quincy Adams is he left a very personal record behind. He kept a diary from 1779 when he was a teenager to 1848 when he was 80 years old.
That's incredible.
And it runs 14,000 pages long. It is, it's actually, we could all read it online. It's Primary Source Co-op, which is, was created by or initiated by the Massachusetts Historical Society. And it's a database and you can pick out the day, the year, but he left this record, a day-by-day, play-by-play TikTok of not only his personal life, which was very tragic at times, but also his times. He left a record of his times to the point where if you read a book about the 19th century American politics, it's a good chance you'll look in the back of that book. And one of the sources, whether it's about John Quincy Adams or not, one of the sources in that book is his diary.
Yeah. He's a one-term president. He's defeated. You mentioned his comment about, hey, congressman, be bold.
Be bold.
Think about the country, but not your constituents.
Right.
Which you said is kind of can be seen as thumbing your nose at the common person. And then he's defeated by a populist.
Right. So let me set this up for everybody. Let me set the table here for you. What Adams wanted Congress to be bold about was this thing called the American system, which was made popular by a guy named Henry Clay. But it's basically federally funded roads, bridges, what we call today infrastructure.
And we have to remember there's no infrastructure. He's trying to establish a nation.
And you have a growing, he says this, he writes this in 1825, January of 1825. 200 years ago. And the nation is expanding.
Yeah.
There are 24 at this point, I think 24 states. And we are expanding westward and southward. And the nation, right, it's disparate. It is separated by rivers and mountains, and he is saying, "Let's invest in ourselves
Yes.
and build roads
Have the
and
vision that maybe
bridges."
other people who don't have this view cannot.
But other have the vision that other people in Europe have.
Sure.
And this is what gets him unpopular, because before that, before he says, "Don't be like the sentence, the paragraph before, he's saying, in Europe, they're building national institutions
Mm,
of higher education.
sure.
They're building what Adams called lighthouses of the sky, telescopes for scientific research. He's trying to get Congress to invest in a naval academy. All of these things that today we're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And we still argue over infrastructure, right? But like, look, from 2000, it was Infrastructure Week from 2001, January of
It was a long week.
2021, or no, January of 2017 until the middle of the Biden
Yeah.
administration. It was
Yeah, it was a
infrastructure.
long week.
It was a long week. But so Adams has this vision of a federal government that brings a nation together when the people didn't want that.
Absolutely.
They wanted to be left on there. They wanted a piece of land
Yep.
they could farm.
Pioneer spirit was
They wanted to
fun.
trade.
Yeah.
They wanted the government out of their business. And that was the there's a lot of generational aspects to this, right? It's like, think about your father's generation,
Mhm.
right? Our father's generation. We have every generation, every new generation seeks to defy the generation that came before. They want to make their own statement. They want to put their own stamp on civilization, on their country, on their family's name. And what was the generation before John Quincy Adams? Who were his parents?
Yeah.
They were the nation's founders.
Yeah.
Literally, his father is one of the
Mhm.
he's the second president of the United States.
Yeah.
First vice president of the United States. And so John Quincy Adams, who was raised to serve this young nation that his parents sacrificed so much for, and to be a public servant,
Mm.
and groomed in many ways to be president of the United
Yes.
States.
And groomed in Europe,
In Europe.
right, with all of these nationalist ideals kind of imposed upon him.
Right. But when it becomes his turn, the nation had shifted.
Yeah.
And like you said, they saw the rise of populism.
Yes. And then you have Andrew Jackson
Andrew Jackson, yes.
sweep into office and, kind of promising to be the president of the people and then consolidating power like a king.
A common man for the common man.
Yeah.
But he
Didn't work
was a
quite
really
that
rich
way.
guy,
Yeah.
and he owned like 150 slaves.
Yeah.
And Andrew Jackson was very wealthy.
And he thumbed his
But
nose at the federal government.
he did,
And the strain.
but the people loved him
Sure.
because they believed he was someone who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and in many ways he did.
Yeah.
He was he was affected by the Revolutionary War. He was in the war. Like, there's some debate. You write a book and then you kind of think about it and you're like, yeah, maybe I should have phrased that differently. But at one point, I talk about James Monroe, and John Quincy serves as the Secretary of State under
Mhm.
James Monroe. And James Monroe was, I say, the last of the founding presidents, the last president who was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. In many ways, Andrew Jackson was a veteran of the
Yeah.
Revolutionary War, because as a young boy in the Waxhaws of North Carolina, that border region between North Carolina and South Carolina, Andrew Jackson worked as a messenger, and he was kind of in it. He was very young, but at one point he gets captured by a British soldier, and the soldier hits him over the face with the back end of I believe it was the back end of a knife. Maybe it could have been a gun, but he's scarred for life from that. Scarred physically, scarred emotionally.
Yeah. What a great origin story.
He hates the British
Yeah.
after that forever. But then he goes on to be the hero of the Battle of New Orleans, ending. It was really after the end of the War of 1812, but it's kind of the battle that signifies the end of the War of 1812, and it's really our second War of Independence.
Yeah.
And after that, we come into our I like to call our tortured adolescence as a nation. And so Jackson, the American people saw in Jackson a little bit of what they saw in Washington before him, but they saw him as a man like them
Yeah.
who was hardscrabble and was not the establishment
Sure.
of which John Quincy Adams at this point represented.
And, Andrew Jackson, as you said, really tapped into the zeitgeist at the time, this aspirational American individualism, whereas John Quincy Adams is trying to sell this collective federalism. And after Andrew Jackson's presidency, it seems to me, especially in light of reading your book, that John Quincy Adams spent the rest of his political career trying to claw back that idea of a robust, healthy federal government.
He did, and the thing that was getting in the way of that was slavery.
Sure. Yeah.
And so Adams is indeed a failed one-term president. His, I think we should speak just briefly about how how he was elected president.
Sure. Yeah.
So there were four, really, first there were five men in the race for the presidency. Was William Crawford, who was the Treasury Secretary under Monroe, and he was in many ways Adams's nemesis. There was Andrew Jackson, who we've already spoken about, and there was Henry Clay, who was the Speaker of the House. Clay was from Kentucky. He was very charismatic, but as we said, like he believed, like Adams, he believed in this strong federalism and this American system where the government would pay for infrastructure around the country.
Sure.
So in the election, Jackson wins the most electoral votes, but he doesn't win a majority. He wins a plurality. And based on the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, when that happens, the top three vote getters go stand for election in the House of Representatives. And it was this situation where Clay was no longer a candidate, but he was a kingmaker.
Yeah.
And Clay men from Kentucky and Clay himself felt that, well, there's a longstanding hatred between Henry Clay and Andrew Jackson that goes back about, at this point, about 10, 15 years. And Clay knows, the man who best represents what I believe is John Quincy Adams. Clay also knows that at this point in our nation, the majority of men elected president had previously served as Secretary of State.
Yeah.
And so Clay swings his support behind Adams. Adams is elected in the House and becomes president, and then names Clay his Secretary of State, which the opposition press, the Jackson men, called this, wait for it, a corrupt bargain.
Sure.
It was a stolen election in
Yeah.
the eyes of many. In the eyes of many, it was a stolen election. And so Adams never has support.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse for Adams, you come into office, you appoint your men to these positions. Some of them are positions where you can make a lot of money. Adams didn't play politics. Philip Hone, who was New York City mayor, wrote after Adams's passing that Adams's desire to avoid political influence of any political party lost him all the favor of all the parties. Like, he just didn't play politics. There was one political appointee who actively worked against Adams in the election of 1824, and Adams, when his advisors or his cabinet asked him if Adams was going to replace him, he's like, no, he's doing a good job. Why would I replace him? Even though he didn't support him politically. So Adams didn't play politics, and that hurt him. So he didn't get a whole lot done. But so Adams loses re-election. So when, Jackson stands again against him, there's no question. There's no plurality. Adams took losing the presidency in 1828 as like he was personally rejected by the American people.
Yeah.
Who he spent his whole life serving. And so months after losing the presidency, his son commits suicide. And this was a low point.
And had he already lost a daughter?
He had lost a daughter when he served James Madison appointed him minister to Russia, and he and his wife Louisa lost a daughter in Russia. And so he is approached by these men to run for Congress. And he says, back then you don't like go around and say I'm standing for Congress and make speeches. If that would be untoward.
Yeah.
He said, but if the people elect me, I'll serve. And his wife finds out about it. She reads it in the paper.
Sounds like a politician.
Yeah. And so anyway, so it's in Congress where Adams finds redemption.
Yeah. And he's the only former president
To this
to
day.
serve in Congress.
To this day.
Not even in the Senate.
Right.
In
Andrew
the House
Johnson.
of Representatives.
Right. So Adams served 17 years in the House of Representatives. After his impeachment and his presidency, Andrew Johnson from North Carolina is elected to the Senate.
Hmm.
I think from Tennessee at this point.
Mhm.
But he serves a couple months. Maybe he doesn't even arrive. He died
Mhm.
shortly after that.
Yeah.
So really, technically, Adams is the only former president to serve in Congress after his term.
So I want to ask you, you told me before we started filming that you wrote this in about a year, which I find stunning.
Yeah.
I know that you were an Adams scholar, you're a history scholar, you've got an MA in history, so I imagine you had the outline of knowledge, the outline of the discussion. I imagine you still had to do a lot of research. That's its own thing. But writing is an entirely different thing. To have written this book in a year, I find breathtaking personally.
Well, I learned a lot from this process.
Yeah.
And a lot of historians, rightfully so, take a decade to write a book or several years to write a book. This is not cradle to grave.
Yeah.
That was in my favor. I had a very specific idea of what I wanted to do with this. We can talk about this later, but Adams in Congress works with these abolitionists.
Yes.
And he was an icy cold man, but he forms these two relationships that I would almost characterize as tender with these two, think of them today as activists.
Sure.
And
Ardent activist.
But I had previously done a 6-part podcast series called John Quincy Adams' the founding son, John Quincy Adams' America. And that was researching that gave me a good head start.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, you recorded a number of albums with the Avett Brothers. Can you hold the process of writing a book by yourself beside being in the studio and recording an album? Putting together this kind of lasting document that's a testament to a very particular time in your life, that's a singular experience. What were things that you had gathered or skills that you had gathered in your work in the studio for the grind it takes to put an album together that you were able to apply to putting a book together?
Editing, and try everything. And writing through, so if we're in the studio and somebody has an idea, we've learned that you have to kind of try that idea out, even if it takes you a couple days and it's a dead end.
Yeah.
You have to live out that idea. You have to see it, reality. And I think writing's similar, right? You have an idea about something, and until you write through it, you don't really know if it works or not.
Yeah.
And so those are, I would say, but the big thing is editing. So much of making music, and this is the biggest thing I've learned in my life about art is editing. When I was young, I thought it was the Jack Kerouac school.
It comes in a rush and
It's got to come
get it out.
It's all passion and it's all this moment. It's all of the moment. And, journal writing or whatnot, that's what that's for. But as far as making, art and casting a vision, I think editing is the biggest thing.
So I'm
And that's
imagining
music. That's as much music
absolutely.
as it is writing.
And then you're mastering the album at the end, or somebody's mastering the
Yeah.
album,
Yeah.
and you're getting your first pass pages.
Right.
It's your last chance to really
Oh my
what are the
gosh.
registers? What is
Yeah.
the sound?
And that's the whole thing too.
Is it a similar feeling? Are you like,
Well, I
somebody's
mean,
gonna hear this, somebody's gonna read this?
yeah, like, but you just you learn like I found, and I don't know, you may like have had similar experience. Other writers I've spoken to have had a similar. Like you kind of lose perspective at some point
Mhm.
because it's like feedback is so. I think feedback is well, as one writer told me, like feedback is only feedback,
Sure.
but feedback can be a good thing.
Yeah.
And I've be being in the band and Scott and Seth being such creative forces, I don't have to worry about so much of that. I
Mm.
have my opinions. I voice my opinions, but there are a lot of people, Scott, Seth, Rick Rubin. Like there's a lot of people bouncing things
Yeah.
off of each other.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and
Did you miss that when you were writing? That the immediacy of
I
that
didn't miss it
feedback?
while I was writing because I loved this. The beauty of this project was having a place to go.
Yeah.
Like this was somewhere working on this was somewhere I could go, and I loved going there.
Yeah.
It was like visiting a friend.
Sure.
It was like I just really love research. I love writing. Like I love thinking about it. I love like, man, can I get Benjamin these Ablett? Can I get like this isn't like on these bookshelves, there are several John Quincy Adams biographies. But this book, I wanted to do something that was more focused and targeted, and I wanted to show like the cameras on him and these other characters, but like it's this time period. Like it's not like it's like 1820, 1848, and what a rupture from the moment of the Missouri Compromise to the end of the Mexican War.
Sure.
Like that was a turbulent, I like America's tortured adolescence because we're not yet at the Civil War. Adams is predicting the Civil War in 1820.
Yeah. And people don't realize the turbulence of those decades leading up to the war. It wasn't like shots fired on Fort Sumter out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it was this hornet's nest of
Hornet's Nest.
yeah,
So could you imagine a time when slavery would never end?
yeah,
And that's what this time was.
sure.
The end of slavery is not only not inevitable, it is unforeseeable.
Mhm. It's so entrenched.
It's
It's
so
entrenched in
entrenched.
the
It's
economy. It's
big
entrenched in
business.
the legal
It is
code.
the economic driver of
Yeah,
this of the South.
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
machine. The enslaved people are the machinery of the South.
Mhm.
And so the South needs that. The, plantation owners need that.
Yeah.
Cotton, the agriculture industry needs their
And
machinery.
it's a class signifier. It's what people are basing their identity
Right.
on in relief of enslavement.
Right.
It's that's a powerful way to think about it. I want to ask, so you're here in North Carolina. You've been living in North Carolina since around 2000, right?
I've been in, 96.
96. So what are some of your favorite historical parts of North Carolina
Mm.
that you can lose yourself in or lose yourself in thought?
Well, New Bern,
Sure.
Governor Trion's
Yeah.
Palace, that whole area. I'm actually learning more about New Bern than I just something came up a couple days ago about New Bern that I didn't
Mhm.
realize. I'd like to learn more about Wilmington. I know Cornwallis. Well, I visited where's Cornwallis stayed there in Wilmington, and there was like a path to the river.
Mhm.
Um, I'd like to look like this one character in this book, Benjamin Lundy. The Upper South, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee, in the 18 teens, before the Missouri Compromise, this was kind of a hotbed of abolitionism.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I'm
People
curious
realize that.
specifically about the Moravians and I'm curious about more of that. Thomas Hart Benton, of course, is from Hillsborough.
Mhm.
he is a fascinating character
Yeah.
in this time period of Adams. He's very, very relevant and past Adams's life. Um, so of the Over Mountain Men, of course, Kings Mountain.
Sure.
So Eastern Tennessee, like we took a drive. We go to St. Jude in Memphis a couple times a year for my daughter's checkups, and a couple times we like to stop around Knoxville on our way. And I went out to is it Jonesboro, Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee, and Andrew Johnson's kind of,
Sure.
but Benjamin Lundy went through there, and Andrew Jackson went through there, and there's a lot of a great history there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was a hotbed. That Eastern Tennessee was like a lot of like abolitionist sentiment. They were not like the rest of the South.
And during the Civil War, as I'm sure you know, Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina, there's a lot of resistance to the war, to conscription, a lot of guerrilla warfare happening in the mountains there.
Yeah, because a lot of ordinary Southerners didn't own slaves.
Yeah.
They couldn't afford it.
These are rich.
And in the mountains, you don't really have plantations. I
Yeah.
don't believe so.
Well, Bob, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This episode of the Our State Book Club podcast is sponsored by Deerfield Episcopal Retirement Community in Asheville, North Carolina.
I'm proud to dedicate the 2026 season of the Our State Book Club podcast to D.G. Martin.
What might it be like underneath the sunrise in a state of flight? Coming back on me, it seems wonderful, the wandering mountain birds on a beach. Never moments ever wasted, turning away from your love. Honeybees, gardens of sweeter fruit never tasted, no turning to other things. Will you be, will you seem? Sweeter fruit never tasted, don't turn your back on me. Mountains pushing into the sea.